Hello everybody, this is SF Scala Developer Series, and here we are on location at Sungevity for an SF Scala meetup with speakers including Bill Venners, one of the authors of the original Scala book. And he's going to talk about testing and some interesting developments in Scalactic, which is the library which came from Bill's testing work. But you know, Bill's a very well-known guy in the Scala community, so we'll use this opportunity to learn a little bit more about him and his Scala interest. Welcome, Bill. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Alexy.
Bill is also in East Bay resident, so we're all here in Oakland. You know, very excited to be here in kind of the same habitat.
Yeah.
And so I'll, of course, ask you, what is your kind of Scala history? How did you come to Scala in the first place, and how did the Scala book came to be?
Okay, that's going back a ways. So that was 2006. I somehow heard about it. We were doing a community website, a programmer community website, rtma.com, and we interviewed people, we posted news items, did that sort of thing, and sold ads. So somehow we heard about Scala. We posted a news item on Scala, and that's how we first interacted with Martin Odersky about that, and he actually kind of corrected us. We kind of said it was about XML literals.
Yes, yes.
So at some point we got the vibe from the, just talking to lots of different people that functional programming might be, or like the mainstream programming community might be ready to look at functional programming. And so we contacted Martin to see if he wanted to write some articles on Artima about functional programming, just to explain it, but to use Scala as an example language.
Okay.
So he said, yeah, but he also kind of wanted to write a book about Scala, and we said, well, we'd like to publish a book about, we want to publish books. We were thinking about doing that so we'd have something besides ads to sell, something to sell directly to the audience, which was fairly substantial at that time. And so we just, we worked out that he and Lex Spoon would write the book and Artima would publish it. But it was such a huge task that we needed another author, so I volunteered. And the other reason I did that was so that I'd have some credibility to go around and talk about Scala, because I needed to promote this book we poured so much into. So that gave me credibility having my name on it. But that's how that started. As far as Scala itself, I really liked it because it had static typing, and I really liked static typing, and I was a Java guy. I just was tired with the verbosity of Java and didn't want to give up static typing, so Scala seemed like the one direction. Actually, what I liked about it too was that it was binary compatible with Java.
Yes.
But break source compatibility. I thought that was a good way forward. So.
Right, it's binary compatible with Java, but it was not binary compatible with its own versions.
That's right.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
Which
right.
The story changes, now, but yeah, those interesting times. So this is actually great. That's very interesting insight. How much writing, kind of, if you can talk about it, in the original book was you and others? Because it's one of the book won awards for its clarity, and it's still one of the best programming books. Yeah,
well, thank you. We all of us were all over the place, but it was. When I counted pages, I think Martin wrote half, and me and Lex split the other half, maybe. But it's really hard to say. I mean, everybody was all over the place, but it wasn't like one person's name was on there and they didn't do any work. Everybody just poured an enormous amount of time into it.
Who brought kind of the most, or a lot of clarity? Like it really stands out as very rigorous book, and there is not much repetition in it, right? So I think it's won the award for that, and it's I would recommend it as a good programming book for any programming language, right? So I just wonder how it became that way.
I think it was just lots and lots of hard work. So Martin was motivated to work really hard because it was his language, and he needed a good book. I was motivated because it was Artima's first book, and it needed to be good. Yes. And so we just poured enormous amount of time in it, and Lex was just a nice guy, and he just poured an enormous amount of time into it. And it's really just hard work. I mean, books don't make a lot of money usually, and even this one, it's sold pretty well. It's not, we can retire on it or anything. So it's just, labor of love. We just sort of were motivated to make it as absolutely good as possible. And like an example is like reducing duplication. Like there's a lot of duplication when you write stuff. It just takes time to kind of get rid of it. And there's still like a page and a half that I couldn't figure out how to get rid of. It's buried in there of kind of repetition. But
yeah, but that's
it. It's just hard work.
It came out really well, and I think it's it's a real treasure. I think. Personally, I think that's one of the main assets of Scala community, that we started with this book, right? And it's kind of set the tone and kind of the level, right? It's not very common, and very often you get a book like this. So we're really looking to have this book in Scala community forever, right? Like we want to see it updated.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. I don't want to Osborne myself, but we very much are agree with that.
Yes,
we need
absolutely.
to definitely do that.
That's great. That's great. Because now there are even talks, at Scala conferences. What's new
since
the book
came out?
Since the second edition,
terrible.
Right?
The problem is we're just all very busy doing things, and so, but we do need to do that definitely.
So I'm curious about Artemis. So you also publish other books like Scala Puzzlers, and so what's interesting for you in publishing? How do you find that affecting your technical work, and how did you become a publisher?
I was a writer. I wrote a book way back when the early Java days, and then I wrote articles, and came to it from writing. And then when the .com crash happened, I said, hey, I should create a .com. That was a real, not the best timing, but that's what we did. So me and Frank Summers and some other folks, we did this small community website. I mean, it wasn't small in terms of a lot of people were coming to visit it, but that was really how I got into editing and publishing, was through publishing on the web first, and being an author.
How did the name Artima
Artima was back when I tried to start a company that was about educational software. I took 2 letters from learn, 2 letters from think, and 2 letters from imagine. That's ARTIMA. And it was also didn't mean anything.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Greek goddess.
Well, yeah, I know. It's a little bit like
one
Artemis.
of the muses, the missing muse of programming.
But what is she?
She's the muse of programming.
Okay, well then that's perfect. Yeah.
Or maybe she's the muse of testing. Right?
Yeah. So it really meant, it was like Kodak. Kodak didn't mean anything, but was supposed to be easy to say. The one concern I had was there's an R in there, so in Japanese it's a little harder to say.
It will be Ultima, right? It will be like a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a little bit. So this is a great name, right? How did you come to work on ScalaTest, and what's interesting in the testing space?
So ScalaTest was in part, I was Martin knew Scala pretty well. Lex Spoon knew Scala pretty well because he was getting his PhD under Martin over there, and I didn't know Scala at all. I mean, I was just very familiar with, and so if I'm going to help with this book, I really need to learn it somehow. So I decided I'll port a Java test framework that I had. That was actually the original thing, but I thought, well, Arisa, people might, because the other thing is I thought, there might be an opportunity that people would actually use it since it's a new language. But originally it was just for me to learn Scala on something that was not mission critical, business critical or anything. It's off to the side. But it got a lot of users, and it just has consumed my life for 8 years now. I mean, it's just spent an enormous amount of time on ScalaTest all that time. And Scalactic grew out of that, and then SuperSafe, the compiler plugin, has grown out of both of those things. So it's really, kind of taken over my life a little bit too much, maybe.
Well, this is a great contribution to the Scala community, right? I think I know most companies I know are using ScalaTest, right? So this is really powering test-driven development for many companies. Which will be my next question. What do you think of this test-driven development approach, and how do you see companies using it? Is it really kind of driving a lot of development?
Well, I write tests first most of the time, and I find that helps me make sure that things work. I remember years ago when I first heard about it, I was interviewing like this. I was interviewing, back when I was doing the media website, interviewed Martin Fowler.
Yes.
And he said that, and I thought, well, this is kind of crazy. Why would you write the test first, And he said he talked to this friend whose boss came up to him and asked him how much of his code was working. And he said, all of it, because he would write a little test and then write just enough code to get it to run, and then, he'd do that thing. And basically, at any point, everything's working that you know about. So I find that works for me. It doesn't, I know a lot of people just don't want, they don't want to do it because it's drudgery. It's like a chore. And so they'll put it off, and sometimes they'll write a bunch of stuff first to get it working, and then they'll write tests later. And that also works. And some people don't write tests that are automated. They just test it by hand, and sometimes that works. Depends on the situation. But I wouldn't say everybody's doing it. I think a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, I mean, it's much easier not to do the test, right? And actually take some discipline.
Yeah, well, you can test it by hand, and then it works. But the problem is you don't get the regression test for later that you get sort of as a side effect, a good side effect.
Yes.
Of writing tests first and doing a little bit at a time like that.
So I remember at the time, when I did the Ruby-based startup, we had 25,000 tests, which were ran for half an hour in Ruby, and
Wow.
that was one of the reasons I really wanted to switch to Scala. And obviously, a lot of these tests were checking things like is the function called with the right number of arguments, or like are they strings or not. So basically, you don't need this in Scala, and type system actually removes the need for many tests. But so how do you see type system interacting with tests?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my talk at ScalaTest is kind of about that, because what ScalaTest is like is quality through tests, and Scalactic is quality through type. So if you like the different ways of using types to get quality. So one of the things you want to do is remove requirements. There's actually something called requirements in Scalactic, which is a macro that gives you a nice failure message if you fail a requirement. And it does the same kind of thing that ScalaTest does with the macro, analyzes the Boolean expression. So if you say require that the int is passed is greater than 0, you'll actually, a lot of times people don't write the error messages either when they do requires. So you just get this exception. But it will tell you, if you use the requirements require, it'll tell you which one, what the numbers were and whatnot. But still, if you can get rid of those, that's better, because now you don't have to test for it, but also can't blow up. So in Scalactic in 2.3, which we'll release before Scala Days in the next few weeks, there's a pause_int type, which uses a macro to ensure compile time that literals are actually positive. So it's using macros to sort of check something about the value at runtime, and then allows you to just make sure, basically when you take a pause_int, you don't need to require that it's positive, it's in the type that it's positive. And that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of things you can do with types, and you should when it's practical. Sometimes it's impractical. And that's because then if it compiles, that's true. But then there's things where you can't, and that's where you can write tests. And the other side of that is I think static analysis is a little bit undervalued in the mainstream programming community. So I think and so that's sort of the third prong that I've started exploring recently with the SuperSafe plugin, which finds errors that pass the type checker but at compile time.
Yes.
And things like you can ensure that if your equals comparisons are sane at compile time, even though insane ones, like comparing an option of string with a string, would pass the type checker. It's, the type checking allows it, but static analysis could, cause it to fail to compile.
Interesting. Yeah, well, definitely looking forward to your Scalactic talk today. And I think I will, close with kind of a big question, right? So, in ScalaTest basically is used to test a lot of Scala code, and Scala communities go in new directions all the time. So, for instance, when Akka appeared, right, people need to test Akka, and then Scala.js appeared. People need to see Scala and to use Scala.js. So, what is your strategy, and where do you see Scala going, and kind of how do you decide what's important, and where do you want to basically add capabilities to ScalaTest, so hopefully it can test all kinds of Scala code?
Well, I think you just have to listen. So Scala.js, I think, is very, very, very promising. And it's, the JavaScript is there's a lot of people writing JavaScript, so that's a pretty huge potential. So we are working on that in ScalaTest. There's a lot of things that are in ScalaTest, the way it's written right now, that don't work under Scala.js, but they're not unsolvable. So we have to do a lot of work, but That's actually something we're working on right now is supporting Scala.js. And short term, we can just run it through. They have an existing sort of SBT test, something like the SBT test framework where you can get a console output. But long term, what we really want to do is something like we do when you fork an SBT test run. In the forked VM where the tests actually execute, there's a piece of ScalaTest that sends ScalaTest events across the network to the other side of ScalaTest, so it's like a distributed ScalaTest. People don't know that's what's going on, but that's what's going on. And then all the reporting is done over here. So like creating XML files for JUnit XML or just our file output, that stuff you really can't do over here, but you can over here, so that's what we long-term need to have. It's not that long-term, but it's a bit of work. We can't do it right away. That's what we're working towards, where in the JavaScript VM, you're sort of running on this, ScalaTest.js thing. It's communicating back to the JVM, and you can get all the reports you want and all the features that you like, but running your tests in JavaScript.
Okay. And do you see contributions from the source community to help you get there faster?
Yeah, what the community really helps with is a lot of smaller things, which is really helpful. They fix a lot of little things, they contribute things, not that little, but something as major as this, we have to sort of do it ourselves. So we get funding from, sometimes when we're fortunate, we get funding from users, customers. They're not really customers, they use ScalaTest for free, but they're interested in a feature, they'll sometimes give us some money to help sort of pay for doing these big things.
So we need a big Scala.js customer who will help you get there faster.
Yes.
Okay. If you are using Scala.js in production, please, contact Bill. Well, it's great to have you here with us, Bill.
Yeah,
we're looking forward
Alexy.
to your talk. Always entertaining, always deep. So great to have you here with us in the community.
All right, thanks, Alexy. Thanks for doing this stuff, by the way.
Thank you.